BC Teachers Federation says the Federation will not celebrate Canada Day. Instead, it will be celebrating, quote, Land Back Day on July 1st. You know what? We might chuckle about this, but this is a problem, a systemic problem in education right now in many Western countries, where we're being taught to despise our country, to hate our history. And you know, Drea, how tone deaf can you be? I alluded in the first half hour that right now, I think your province has a crisis on its hands with questions about private property ownership. And you see a taxpayer-funded entity like the BC Teachers Federation going along with this. You know, I wonder if Miss Kleiner, I wonder if she has a home that she is going to surrender to a Native group, you know, like, exactly. Don't tell me, show me, right?
No, you know what? We are in an absolute crisis. This has to stop. Everybody is watching British Columbia, not just across the country. Now it's starting to get international, where people are going, what the heck is going on there under what I call reconciliation overreach? And so you see what our kids are being taught. It's such a lie. Some of my family was invited here. This was the land of the free, something to celebrate, where you could escape slavery and come and live, you know, and then get your own land back east. We were actually given land. And then we were able to make businesses and things like that. I mean, that is Canada. And in British Columbia, we do have only two very strong voices calling this out. They're both from the One BC party, led by Dallas Brody. And the House Speaker of that group is MLA Tara Armstrong. And she recently said, you know, Canada was not stolen, it was built. And, you know, we can talk about bad things that happen in history, absolutely, but that doesn't blanket all of the great things that made Canada this place where people from all across the world have been wanting to come here in droves. Now they're coming here and finding out it's not quite what they thought anymore. But we need to hold on to that. We need to make sure our kids, our grandkids are knowing the truth about Canada. And when you talk about the private property rights, you know, it's getting real. It's beyond real. I've been warning the public about how British Columbia adopted the UN's aspirational framework for Indigenous rights, not the UN's framework for human rights, which would have been for all of us, but just Indigenous rights, which overreach everything, including land rights. So to the point that we made that aspirational framework law binding here in 2019. The UNDRIP has become what we abbreviate as DRIPA. And that is how you're seeing the crazy ruling like the Cowichan tribes versus Canada. And now we learned that all of Kamloops is up for grab, all the private property there and some more in surrounding areas. This is not a joke. So when you see unions and whatever saying things like this, you need to immediately call it out. If you're a member, if you see your principal doing it, it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. And of course, if your MLA is doing it like the NDP, you need to reach out to them as well. You know, and we have a website called, I should say, we have a website where you can sign our petition. I'm going to hand deliver that to, you know, some of the leaders. In particular, it's the NDP out here at endlandgrabs.com.
Well, you know, Drea, I think this issue is ultimately headed to the courts, up to and including the Supreme Court of Canada. And unless they put the kibosh on this insanity, you know, truth and reconciliation, I've said this to you before, I mean, it's all about going forward. Did we have a perfect history with Natives in this nation? No, of course we didn't. And of course there were slights and wrongdoings. But truth and reconciliation is about getting together, moving forward, you know, setting a new template, sharing the wealth all around. If this becomes a fact of life in BC, and this virus, I have no doubt, is going to spread to other provinces in Canada, and as I understand it, there's even a U.S. Native tribe that is putting a claim on some land in British Columbia. If this is allowed to happen, Drea, that people who have spent 30, 35, 40 years of their lives, busting their asses, paying down a mortgage, only to have a sheriff show up with a piece of paper and saying, sorry, that house is not yours. That will set Truth and Reconciliation back more than 150 years. I could see little mini Wacos breaking out with the rage that this would encounter. Hey, maybe that's the reason for the fetish for the gun grab that the Liberals have to prevent that. What say you?
Absolutely. The decision has already taken us back in reconciliation. There's no question about that. And you talk about it going through the courts. It's already in appeals, not with the Supreme Court yet. But then the property owners are waking up to the fact that, hey, our government didn't even stand up for us in the first place. They didn't argue the most strongest argument for this situation, which was extinguishment of Aboriginal title. Richmond said, hey, we need to argue this. But for some reason, Canada and Eby himself, because he was the Attorney General at the time, they did not allow their lawyers to argue that. We are also seeing more recently, just in the last couple of days, I think it was officially filed on the 21st, that there is a proposed class action about to happen. It's been filed, the proposal for it. It needs to be certified. And that's being taken on by two different landowners in Richmond. One is a man who owns a business out in Burnaby, but both of them own land. And they are basically making the allegations, of course, with a lot of credibility, that they were sold property under false pretenses, where the government, and they paid taxes under such, because the government knew all along that there was this dispute going on and they were not informed. And they also bring up in that case as well, in that proposed legislation class action, they also bring up the fact that they were not properly, their property rights were not properly defended by the province that they're supposed to, the province and the federal government that they're supposed to count on for this appeals. So it's looking very grim, to be honest, on what it meant when the BC Supreme Court said your fee simple title, which is supposed to be secure, is now defective and invalid, and Aboriginal title supersedes it.
Unbelievable. And Drea, tell me, if you owned property in, say, Kamloops or Richmond, BC, is it even sellable right now with all the uncertainty?
Who's going to buy it, and how low of a price are you going to sell it for? This is the everyday thoughts that these home landowners are having, not to mention, am I going to be able to renew my mortgage? We're already seeing many of them saying that that's going to be an issue. Who's going to lend them money to renew their mortgage? Nobody knows exactly what this means. At the end of the day, is it just going to be a money grab for these First Nations? Remember that 100% of British Columbia is being disputed over one way or another from over 200 bands who don't even agree with each other on whose land is whose. So when does this end?
And you know what? We're certainly not getting any leadership from the federal Liberals. Look at this news item, Drea. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand reproaches Senate Foreign Affairs Committee for not beginning Thursday's hearing with a land acknowledgement. Drea, this is throwing gasoline onto a raging fire.
It is so out of touch, but that is good news. It's good news that the land acknowledgement did not happen. That's what we're seeing there. And I am hearing that, from teachers who are afraid to speak up, but they're sending me messages saying, just so you know, they didn't do the land acknowledgement. There is a shift happening. People didn't like those compelled land acknowledgements to begin with. And now we're seeing they have good reason not to. But then again, in British Columbia, what did we see? The One BC party put forth a proposal to stop compelled land acknowledgements from public servants. And that was shut down not just by the NDP, which is no surprise, but actually by the BC Conservatives, John Rusted included. Only two of the BC Conservatives said, hey, we'd like to hear this proposed legislation pass first reading. First reading almost always happens. It doesn't mean that you're on board with it. It just means you're going to hear it out. Even the BC Conservatives, except for Abbotsford, Langley's, Harmon, Bangu, and Chilliwack, I want to say Chilliwack North, Heather Moth. Those were the only two out of the BC Conservatives to say enough is enough. We don't have the right, the public servants don't have the right to speak on behalf of these property owners and say that the land is unceded.